Hey, what's up guys? Tom from Positive Lead Diagnostics. Today we are working on a 2013 Volkswagen Tiguan with a 2-liter turbo engine. This is a GDI, so it's direct ejection. So this vehicle's in for misfire. It's a P0304. So I've already started looking at it. I was looking at it earlier. You can tell that it has new plugs and the ignition coil on cylinder 4 is new. So I'm just trying to get this one done as quickly as possible. First test I want to do is going to be relative compression, and that's going to check compression across the board for every cylinder, and also I want you to hear the way it cranks too. So first test coming up is going to be relative compression, and the only reason I'm going that way, number one, it's easy to do. Number two, it's already had everything else on cylinder 4 replaced, and it still isn't fixed. So that's where I'm going first, is relative compression. Alright guys, so here's just a shot of the faults. We're going to focus on this P0304, and right now it's a dead miss. Alright, so I was getting misfire counts on cylinders 2 and 4. So I'm going to start it up. And so right now we have a dead miss on 4. We're getting counts on 1. We're getting counts on 2. Move the RPM. So this is why my focus is on cylinder 4. When I move the RPMs, the only one that counts now is on cylinder 4. So I'm going to shut it off now, and we'll do the first test. Like I said, I was looking at this earlier, and the first test that we did was just unplug the coils, did kind of like a clear flood mode just to listen to how it cranks. Alright, so right now I'm just going to unplug these coils, and we're going to do kind of like a clear flood crank. And I just want you to listen to how this engine cranks over. So all the coils are unplugged, it's not going to start. Just listen to the sound. We'll do it one more time. So that to me is the sound of no compression in one cylinder. What was interesting is at first how it sounded like it did have compression, and then you could hear that change. So we're thinking it's cylinder 4, that's the misfire that it counts on when I raise the RPMs. So to identify that, we're going to put a trigger on ignition coil number 4, the control to the coil, and we will do a relative compression test by putting an amp clamp over top of the negative cable and looking at starter current, which will give us a relative compression of how this engine is. Alright, so I have the Pico hooked up. I have 2 channels right now. The first channel is going to be on my cylinder 4 ignition coil trigger. That is the control from the ECM. And my second channel is this amp clamp. It's going to be on the battery terminal, and what we're going to see is the starter humps amperage, and each hump is going to represent a cylinder coming up the top dead center, and we'll be able to identify what cylinder that is with this, even if cylinder 4 isn't our misfiring cylinder. So the original test was just cranking it over, listening to it, and you could hear it, one cylinder kind of dropped out. So once again, we're going this way because this has already had parts put on this cylinder. So relative compression, ignition coil trigger, and we get you set up on the Pico. Blue trace is going to be my trigger on my coil. Red trace is going to be my starter current. Well, sure enough, that's what we have. We have a dead hole. This is cylinder 4, so this is going to be our trigger of when the coil should fire. And the red humps represent each cylinder coming up to top dead center compression. So when the valves are closed and that piston is coming up, it's being forced up, the pressure is rising. That's mechanical resistance. And what that's going to do is it's going to make the starter work harder. So that's an increase in amperage, and that's what we're seeing right here. So cylinder 4, that's our trigger. It's missing. So I'm pretty sure the firing order would be 1, 3, 4, 2. So if this is 4, 2, 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, 4. So each one. 4, 2, 1, 3, 4, 2. So this is a really quick test, and what we have is no compression in this cylinder 4. But when I first cranked it over, it had compression. You could hear it. You heard the change. So cylinder 4 is a dead hole. We're losing compression in cylinder 4. Alright guys, so where we're at, relative compression test and the sound test, so where we just listened to it, it sounded like it was no compression. And the relative compression test proved that we have cylinder 4 is a dead hole. There's no compression. So the next test I want to do is, where are we losing it? So what I'm thinking of is we could be losing it through a valve. So right now my thoughts are on valves, intake, and exhaust. And what I want to do now is I want to get a pressure transducer. We'll hook it up, and I think it'd be easier if we start with the intake. We'll just hook up to manifold vacuum. We'll keep our amperage, our starter current up on the screen, and we'll compare our manifold pressure to our missing cylinder hump and see if we have a rise in manifold pressure, and that will tell us that we're losing our pressure and it's going into the intake, which would explain a rise in our pressure. Alright guys, so what I'm going to do right now, we need to hook up to this intake manifold somehow. So right here we have, this is the PCV breather hose. So on this side it goes to the breather, on this side it goes to manifold. And so I had one of those old hoses laying around, one of these, and I had my buddy make this. So, and it's just a fitting. We're going to plug this onto the intake and hook up our pressure transducer. It's just going to be this little vacuum hose. So this will go to the transducer, this will go to the manifold, and we'll be able to get manifold pressure and compare it to our relative compression. So that's the test. So here's the transducer. It's got the vacuum hose, and this is going right to our fitting, right into the manifold. And this is how we're getting our manifold waveform. Still have the amp clamp on the battery terminal. So I'll focus you on the Pico. Alright guys, so I have everything set up. Blue trace, channel A is going to be the pressure transducer. And the other one's still on our starter current. All the coils are unplugged, so this is still not going to start. Just want to compare manifold pressure to this relative compression. And what we're looking for in this test is for manifold pressure to rise up when our missing cylinder should be going up on its compression. And if we don't see anything here, then we move on to the exhaust and do the same test. I'm going to crank it up. I didn't even turn my WPS on, but what I noticed, I'll go back, come on. Did you hear how it cranked? No. Why? If you heard how it cranked, we had compression right there. See, they're all uniform. So hopefully we'll still have that. That's what I'm saying. We had this, when I first cranked it, I heard the sound change. Probably, you guys probably heard it on camera. It sounded like it had compression at first, and then you could hear it drop out. So that says that we do have compression right now. Let me turn my WPS on. But at least I was able to catch that and show you. Because I knew it sounded fine at first. Alright, time to crank it over. Alright, WPS is on. Missing hump again. So we lost compression already. So this manifold pressure should also be nice and uniform with the valve openings of the intake. It's just going to be valve opens, closes, opens, closes. And the main focus right here is going to be this missing cylinder. This is our no compression, no compression, no compression. And with that no compression, you can see we do have an increase in our manifold. You see that increase. I wish I could have had the pressure transducer on there when I had the compression. This is an intake valve problem. And I'm saying that because of this increase in our manifold pressure. So we have no compression in the cylinder, and when the piston is going up, if we have an intake valve that's hanging open or something like that, we're going to have an increase that it's going to push all that air that it sucked in back into the manifold. And that's what we have right there. I'm going to try to get this to crank. Just to show you how uniform that map waveform should look. That's the capture right there. So right here, our compression is nice, uniform, and that's when it starts to drop out right there. See that spike? And now we have no compression. There's the increase in the manifold, no compression, increase in the manifold. Look how nice and uniform it is over here when we do have compression. So that's just a valve opening and closing, opening and closing. And then when we lose compression, we have an intake valve that's hanging open. So we're losing that compression, it's going right into the manifold, and that's what that increase is. That's a nice capture right there. Alright guys, so we just identified an intake valve problem. I'm suspecting an intake valve problem just by looking at relative compression, looking at map, pressure, vacuum, whatever you want to call it. What's nice about this is that breather sits right over top of cylinder 4, so we can pull the breather off, and if we do have an intake valve problem, we should be able to see it relatively easy. Alright guys, so I got the breather off, and down here, this is the intake camshaft, and try to get my light focused down in there. If I can. So this intake valve spring is broken. It's kind of hard to see. So that's probably the best angle I'm going to get. You see those lower two coils of this intake valve spring are broken, and that's causing the valve to hang up, and it's keeping the valve open. So it's not holding tension, and the valve is dropping just enough to be open, and we're losing all of our compression. And that's that pressure increase in our manifold waveform. I'm just trying to get you guys a better angle right here. This is going in focus. So that's the spring right there. You see that piece of it, that's where it's broken. So it's a broken intake valve spring. Alright guys, so pretty cool. We got the PCV breather off. Sure enough, there's a broken intake valve spring. Just like we suspected on the intake side, where we're losing this compression, or where we suspected we were losing this compression. So it's pretty cool that we were able to identify no compression on a cylinder and where it's going using a scope. So that's using the Pico WPS 500 and the high amp clamp that came with the Pico kit. So I'll try to get you some after shots after the repair. I'm not sure when it's going to be done. Maybe just some pictures I'll upload to the Facebook page. So we have a misfire, no compression, broken intake valve spring, and we proved that using the scope. And then we also proved it by pulling it apart, getting lucky that it is cylinder 4 where the breather is, and we were able to see both intake valves. So pretty good to show and prove. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.